Spencer Hawes.
That's how he should be pronounced. Yes, there we go.
Haven't heard that in a while.
Marc, will you tell everybody in case they don't know, now that we're welcoming Spencer, who this gentleman is, other than the fact that he is very tall?
Well, for one, he is the other basketball player from Seattle that will be talked about in the news this week. The first one being Nate Robinson. Spencer's having a much better week than he is right now. Spencer Hawes is a basketball player. Played his best years, in my estimation, in my town of Philadelphia. He also played in Cleveland, played in LA, played in Charlotte. 7-foot center, could stretch the floor, hit the three. Also, a very interesting guy from what I've come to learn. I am, for those that don't know, I'm a diehard Sixers fan. And Spencer, I had the courtside seats right next to the Sixers basket. So, and it was during the really shitty years. So I would actually it was like us. It was like me, you guys, and like 10 other people. And
yeah, it was intimate.
Yes, it was very intimate. So I got to watch the game up close, and I got to hear your thoughts, at least on basketball, because it was a very quiet gym. So I felt like I understood you and some of the other players. This is when we were really bad, the tanking years. What I didn't know, and for those of you who are watching might not know, is that Spencer is someone who takes politics seriously, someone who watches the world, someone who reads the newspaper and pays careful attention to politics, and has done so for a long time. And Spencer, you identify as a conservative, right?
Yeah, it's the last few years have kind of put that to a test. I think I've had a little bit of a transition, like most former card-carrying conservatives, Republicans, whatever you want to call us, through this Trump era. But no, I mean, that's something that was kind of the way I was raised, and it's, I feel like it's kind of taboo these days to identify that way. But I also feel like the way the party's gone, there's been a schism of sorts where there's similar to the Democratic Party, there's a lot of I hesitate to call them mainstream factions now within the conservative Republican Party, whatever you want to call it, but it kind of boils down to, your more traditional Reagan Republicans versus now whatever the party of Trump has evolved or devolved into.
So Spencer, were you known among your NBA peers for about a decade or so? You were on the Sixers. You were on. I can't think of all the teams. Marc, he was on.
There's a lot of them.
Drafted by the Kings. You're a whole bunch of different NBA teams.
Yeah.
Were you? Was it known by your peers? Was it something you talked to other players about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was similar to most people's exposure or conversation around politics. Obviously, every 4 years. Maybe every 2 for the midterms, but traditionally every 4 years it would become more of a hot topic, and guys would start paying more attention, reading stuff, whatever they see on TV, and then the election would happen. It would go the way it went, and then it would kind of fade away, and then 4 years later it would happen again. But I think it was something that I was never really shy about. There weren't many that fell into the camp that I associated with. So I think
were there any others that you came across in the NBA who were open about it?
I don't know if there are any other avowed conservatives. There's definitely plenty of closet conservatives, but not a lot of guys that talk about it.
What were some of the things that drew you? Said you were raised that way. What were some of the things that made it appealing to you once you started sort of reading and thinking sort of more independently as an adult?
Well, I think I guess raised that way is maybe not the right way of putting it. It was never really a thing in our household growing up. It wasn't something that was politics or what we talked about around the dinner table or anything like that. I think it was more, it was almost just kind of more the atmosphere. My dad's a small business owner. Growing up in Seattle, you definitely are exposed to more of the other side of things. And then, coming up as a teenager, kind of during the Bush era, that was something that, like I said, it's kind of the every 4-year cycle. It comes up. And I think for me, a lot of the people that I was exposed to, especially in high school, a lot of the teachers and stuff, you kind of hear how they're teaching and the slant that they're coming with, and you're kind of wondering, why can't this be more, these classes should probably be a little bit more objective. And I think it's just a natural when you're at that age, you're kind of naturally rebellious. And so you want to go the other way from the authority. And I think that was really where it kind of sprung from me. I really don't remember paying politics much mind until the 2000 election with the hanging chads and that whole disaster in Florida. And I think that was when I kind of started, was really exposed to it and then started paying attention to it. And then going forward, it just kind of went from there.
Did you ever feel like you were treated either differently by your fellow players or perhaps even by management and folks making decisions about your career because your politics got to be known? And this is something that's conservatives and all other walks of life will often talk about. Is that something, if you're the NBA guy who's a conservative, as you said, not clearly necessarily a Trump supporter, but just a conservative, was that a problem for you?
I don't think it was a problem. I think the thing that was, it's like any interaction you have. The thing that's cool is when you're around people enough and you spend as much time as you spend in the locker room with your teammates, your coaches, all the staff, you have plenty of time for conversations and for discourse. And I think that's the thing that I really appreciated was no matter where you stood, the ability to put it out there and understand where other guys from different backgrounds are coming from and just get exposed to people with completely different backgrounds, values, upbringings, everything down the line that, however you want to call it. I think I had a really eye-opening conversation with a teammate when I was in Philadelphia, and it was before the 2012 election. And we were just kind of talking in the locker room, and I was asking one guy, you make a lot of money, you're in a great position now. How could you vote for someone that wants to take more of that away? And he said, look, man, I don't know how you grew up, but I grew up on welfare. And if it costs me an extra 5 or 10% of my taxes, so another kid like me, has the ability to eat and put food on their family's table, he's like, then it doesn't, that doesn't matter to me. And that was eye-opening for me because I'd never really taken a chance to look at it from that perspective and say, wow, that's something that, I can't disagree with, that I was never exposed to, but now I understand how you came up, why that might shape the way you feel as opposed to my experience.
Did that argument persuade you, though? I mean, the bulk of your NBA career, you were drafted in 2007, right? So the bulk of your NBA career is basically the Obama presidency, where taxes were certainly being raised for people who made the kind of money you make. When you hear the argument of that teammate, hey, you pay a little bit more, but it goes to the people who need it the most. Did it make you reconsider that position? I know you said it helped you understand that position, but did it make you move anyway?
I think so. I think my argument with that, with that whole way of thinking is just kind of show me the benefits of it. Like if you said, hey, we're going to ask people in this tax bracket, we're going to ask you to pay this much more, but we're going to show you directly what it goes to. It's going to go to schools, and here's how we're going to quantify the results and the positive benefits that come from it. Then I think a lot more people will be on board with paying. I think the fair share is kind of the thing that goes around the argument from the left, which I think is well branded from their perspective. I don't think it tells the whole story, but I think that's the issue the whole time is if you could get some quantitative way of measuring the benefits of where where money and taxes are going, I think a lot more people will be on board. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at a lot of things and how so much money gets wasted, I think that's where the disconnect often finds itself between conservatives and liberals.
Spencer, did you feel pressure from teammates or from the league when some of the more activist moments came up? I think back recently, I know that this past year, for example, there's been a lot that's going on with the NBA and the BLM movement, but you could go back even, I forget, Marc, you can tell us.
The 2016 is a good example. I Can't Breathe, when the players were wearing.
Exactly. I Can't Breathe, or the hoodies with Trayvon Martin. That's what I was going to refer to. Yeah. I mean, did you feel like if you didn't partake in that, you were going to get pressured? Perhaps you were going to be, you were worried that your teammates would feel like that was disrespectful. You weren't allowed to have a different view. How did that go?
I don't think so, because I think kind of what I alluded to earlier, the conversations are happening, and it's not like one night one guy just goes and makes a hoodie and rolls it out there. There's a lot more that goes into those decisions, and those are conversations that every team's having constantly before partaking in those types of I don't even want to call them protests, just support of what is I think, undeniably a deserving cause. So I don't think I ever felt pressure because I knew, before any of these things were going on, you're having these conversations, you're on the same page with the rest of the teammates, whether you agree or disagree. But I think with a lot of these issues, I just think it should be more of a consensus. It should not be a political issue. I don't think, what's going on right now, I think the message gets hijacked and the talking heads kind of take over. But at the end of the day, it's a human rights issue. It's not a political issue. And I think that's what gets lost on a lot of people, when the spin starts coming in. And I think it's a disservice across the board.
I got to ask you something. And I never thought I'd be in a place to ask you. Never thought I'd bump into you. When you left Philadelphia, I spoke to at least two former players two former teammates of yours. I also spoke to someone who's very connected to the ownership of the team, and they all said that one of the challenges, because I talked about bringing you back here. I'm like, this guy, 7 feet tall, can stretch the floor. We could use a backup center. Obviously, Joel Embiid's pretty good at basketball, so that would be the kind of role.
Yeah.
And almost uniformly, they said his politics make it hard to get him on a team. They said it to me almost whispering. It was weird. Do you feel like that's the case? Is that hyperbole? What's your sense? Again, two players, one person told me that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've never had an issue beyond a conversation or an argument or anything else like that with one of my teammates when it comes to politics. And I think it might get portrayed more so that's kind of my 24/7, that's what I think about. That's what I talk about. Like I said, I've had conversations, I've had disagreements with guys, but I've never felt like it was an issue that spilled over into affecting chemistry or anything like that.
Can I ask, does it surprise you that Marc I'm sorry, Marc, I was going to follow up on your question. You go ahead, though.
No.
Does it surprise you that Marc would have heard that then?
I think a little bit, but that's something that, when you're out on the outside looking in, you kind of question everything and, what could I have done better? What could I have done differently? I definitely would have watched a little bit less Fox News back in the day. That's something I've cut out of the diet. I wouldn't have worn that shirt the night before the election. That was probably a bad look.
What shirt? Tell us about the shirt.
The Hillary for Prison shirt. That was a moment in youth.
I mean, that's classic for whatever it's worth. I think you get a lot of money for that on eBay now, but fair enough.
Yeah, but probably not the best decision. But we all are a little nearsighted when we're 25, 26. But no, I mean, like I said, I never felt personally like it was an issue beyond the conversations that were being had. But if other people feel that way, I guess that's just kind of a reflection of the state.
What would happen if a player in the NBA, as somebody who was there for many years, what do you think would happen if somebody, wanted to show up and they were going to wear a headband or something? Again, Marc knows a lot more about the NBA than I do. I don't really watch much professional sports. So, but if somebody showed up with, I don't know if you could do this, but in your warm-up gear, you wore like MAGA, if not necessarily even you, I just mean if a player showed up and they were like MAGA Trump 2024
or Blue Lives Matter.
To start, yeah, or Blue Lives Matter. That's a much better. Thank you, Marc. That's a better example. Someone shows up with a Blue Lives Matter shirt on. What do you think happens to the NBA?
I mean, I think they would probably get ostracized for it. I think just like anybody else, and I don't think it's a unique thing to the NBA. I think that just you have to have a little better pulse on kind of the sentiment of society and how fragile things are right now. And I'm not trying to take anything away from police or supporting police, but in the climate that we're in right now, I just think it'd be tone deaf to start off with. But I think there would be backlash, and just like there'd be backlash for if a CEO came out and did it, or anybody else, any other type of celebrity that has that type of.
Do you just worry about the? I didn't mean to cut you off the end. Sorry, but do you worry about the politicization of sports as just a general, irrespective of what the politics may be? I mean, I think we know that the NBA tends to be left-leaning based on what we're talking about here. But there has been this argument made. There's a conception that sports are this thing that people in America love. We love our sports. We love our sports teams, athletes, and it's something that brings everyone together, right? The CEO and the street sweeper. I mean, all these things you'll hear, they love the game. They can all talk about the game. They can talk about how many points did Spencer get last night, and oh man, he hit that jumper and all this stuff. But when you make it about either Black Lives Matter or BLM or Blue Lives Matter or any of these things, it takes away that common ground from society. So, I mean, do you have concerns as somebody who was a part of this league? Do you feel like the politicization of sports is increasing and it is a problem just as a general principle?
I mean, I think it's definitely increasing, but I think that's just how it's going to be going forward. I don't think that that's a page that you can kind of turn backwards. I think that's the society we live in now, and I think that there has been a lot of good that's come out of it, and especially with everything that's happened in the last 6 months or the last year. I think there's been a lot of progress made. There's obviously still a lot to go, but it is something that's turning fans off, and it's obviously the NBA is taking their stance, and I think they have every right to do so, but it's if you get out there and you talk to people, like I had a conversation over Labor Day. I was over in Coeur d'Alene and just met these people, and we're kind of sitting up in the gazebo having a happy hour and asking, and I just kind of casually asked the neighbor lady, "Hey, are you going to watch the game tonight?" And she's like, "No, I'm not going to watch it." She's like, "I'm not watching basketball until they take the political statements off the court." And, agree or disagree, she is one of many people that feel that way. And, I wasn't going to sit there and argue with her about it, but that is something that the way that it's gotten spun into this political issue, not into the social issue and the social justice issue that I think it is and should be celebrated. I think as long as both sides continue to politicize it, it is going to turn people off, and you're going to gain more fans and you're going to lose some fans, and that's the way it goes. I think it's the unfortunate thing about the climate and just the tension in general that's happening in the country.
I always think that it's interesting, though, when people say they want the politics out of sports. My experience is what they really mean is particular politics, right? They
don't. Yeah, they want the politics that they don't agree with.
Exactly,
and everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too. They want athletes to be role models and stand up for causes, but then when they disagree with them, it's shut up and dribble, or it's it's just everyone wants their cake and wants to eat it too. And I think at this stage it's something that's there, and I don't know that it's going away. And I think there's a lot of good that can come from it, because we do have an incredibly unique platform to be able to raise attention to these issues. And when it's done the right way and it doesn't get hijacked, there's a lot of good that comes from it.
It feels like social media has changed this a lot too, right? Because players now, it used to be, I mean, I grew up like, Mark, I had an uncle who had season tickets to the Knicks. So I grew up watching a lot and going to a lot of NBA games here. We could still be friends, even though it was the Knicks. And I know you like the Sixers, but nonetheless, and like the Stockton and Malone and Jordan and, Hakeem Olajuwon and Patrick Ewing era, like all these guys. I always liked the Jazz as a New Yorker. That was always my second favorite team. But anyway, you look at these guys and you look at the way the league used to have so much more of the ability to kind of control brands, right? Whereas now you've got NBA players. I don't even know how many Twitter followers LeBron has. I'm guessing about as many as Donald Trump, probably more, right? I mean, we could pull it up right now. It's definitely 60 million plus. I mean, something like that, right? I mean, these guys. Insane. And there are tons of players. There are players I've never even heard of, and someone will say, "Oh, so and so," and they have 1 million Twitter followers, right? So their every utterance, their every thought goes out to so many people. So that changes it. But I also feel like, speaking of having their cake and eat it too, the NFL. I've watched more football in the last 10 years than I have basketball, and the NFL very clearly has kind of commoditized and advantaged itself with like flags and the military and patriot, and I love all that stuff. I don't even figure this out yet, Spencer. Like, that's my jam. I love all that stuff, right? That's right in my wheelhouse. But and then the NFL sort of turns around, but they want that, but then they don't want people to get upset when they have like the Kaepernick stuff going on and everything else. And it's like, well, I mean, if you're going to open the door for this, it's going to happen. I mean, I
think the NFL is the case study in in an organization being reactive and how not to do it. Whereas the NBA, if you look at the way that they've handled things and they've adjusted and evolved throughout this era of exponential exposure, and social media would probably be the opposite end of the spectrum, where you say the majority of the time they get it right. And I think that is because they take a much more proactive stance about the way that they confront these issues and move forward on these issues. And I think the NFL is finally realizing that their playbook clearly hasn't really been working, and it's caused them to have to do a lot of reckoning along the way.
Let me ask you a question, Spencer, before we go. You talked about wearing the Hillary for Prison shirt. You talked about watching Fox News and having spirited political conversations that in your estimation, didn't bleed into on-court chemistry. Looking back, if you hadn't made it clear that you were a conservative, would you be in the NBA right now? Or better yet, would your NBA career have been longer than it was?
I mean, I don't know. That's something, obviously, when you get waived, you start breaking down everything and you think about it. But, that's not something that I try and beat myself up about, because it's, you can't go back and change the past. And you also, if I'm an outspoken person, I'm an expressive person, I kind of have a combative personality by nature. So that's the way I am. And those are some of the traits that got me to where I got to. So I don't want to play that what if game and try and politicize how it went at the end of my career. It's gone how it's gone. I'd love to get another chance, but I'm not trying to play that.
Have you gotten calls? Have you gotten tryouts? Have you gotten any bites from teams in the last 3 years?
Before last year, I had a couple tryouts. I was actually back in Philly, and went ironically after that over to Milwaukee for a little bit. It didn't work itself out, but hey, if the time's right, I'm staying in shape out here. And
Mark, you got to make some phone calls for our friend here in Philly, all right? You know some people.
I'm going to have
Mark,
to, man.
People who know people.
We signed Dwight Howard, so I don't know if we have room, but there has to be a spot for this guy, man. Again, 7'1", he's a career 35. I don't know if NBA players know their own stats, but he's like a career 35% 3-point shooter for a 7-footer. That's not too bad. It's right around the league average. That means he can stretch the floor. He still rebounds well. You know what I mean? He's a good playmaker. I think Spencer Hawes needs an NBA job. So we're going to do all we can to make sure that happens. I think you got a career in politics and podcasting, but little hoops for another few years might not hurt either.
I agree with my colleague. And before we let you go, Spencer, can I just ask you, because we want to see if we can get you in a little bit of controversy before you go, the greatest center to ever play the game?
I always struggle with this because I'm as guilty of the recency bias as the next guy. But I think if you said the greatest, most dominant across the board, longevity, everything else, I think it's got to be Kareem.
Spencer
really?
Hawes, you and I probably won't agree on very many things, but you, sir, are a genius. That is the only correct answer. There's only two correct answers. Wilt Chamberlain or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Anything else is...
Well, you're biased. You're
dominant. I thought he was going to say Shaquille O'Neal, because usually dominant is followed by Shaquille O'Neal. But
only from people who haven't watched Wilt Chamberlain. But again...
Or the guy that scored more points than anybody ever.
There we go. A very solid answer. Very solid answer. Hey, Spencer, we really appreciate your time, man. You're on Twitter at Spencer Hawes?
Spencer Hawes 00. Still got the Philly numbers behind me.
All right, man. We'll get some people to follow and check out your stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Have a great night.